Hey, Bomb Squad. If you're a comedian or a podcaster looking for an affordable website solution with a modern look, then we recommend Puck's Hub. With a Puck's Hub website, you can set up your new website in minutes with easy-to-use pre-built templates. Puck's Hub websites are customizable and can easily be integrated with other platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The best part? Puck's Hub plans are only $5 per month. We use Puck's Hub for our website at the Art of Bombing podcast, and we think you should too. That's why we've partnered with Puck's Hub to offer listeners a free 60-day trial. Head over to puckshub.com to subscribe and use promo code AOBPOD at checkout for your 60-day free trial, and then pay only $5 per month after that. Take your career to the next level with your own Puck's Hub website today.
Dan Bublitz Comedy Productions.
Showing humility when you bomb. That's what's coming up on the Art of Bombing episode 277.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Art of Bombing podcast. It is me, your host, Dan Bublitz Jr., and with me, as always, is my co-producer, co-host, and cohort, Mr. Josh Shirley. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. It's been raining here in Kansas City all week, and my son went to an all outside swim camp this week, and he's pissed off. It's just I'm not swimming there. It's like his first week off of summer. And
oh no.
He's never been more ready to hit the pool, be outside, play. And it's just
Are you sure? I figured with him getting the new Zelda game, that's probably why he's mad. Out of school, he can just sit at home and play that game until he defeats it.
Well, luckily,
that's if he can get it away from you.
It's true. He's got me to contend with on that point. Yeah, we're screen time parents, Dan. So we kind of have rules around how much of his day he can spend.
Well, that's good. That's smart.
Yeah. It's I think a lot of younger kids, just kind of grow up without any sense of, because if you really think about screen time, video games, I mean, I love video games. I'm the first one to like to play, strategy games and stuff like that. And
I'll tell you this, growing up, video games was my screen time because there wasn't as many screens.
But there's some kind of transaction that happens chemically to you, right? There's a dopamine hit that happens with it. And, when you and me were kids, I think there was no real thought about that, and so when you grow up, particularly like us, sort of the Zennial/millennial generation, we grow up and then it kind of affects your attention span, and you've had kind of unlimited access to that, and so that's what causes this need for immediate gratification that has to be played out. So I've taken us down a weird hole here.
That's all right. We're getting a little inside look at your parenting methods, and I think that's good. I think that's good that we see that, because to me, that's good parenting, because I think, there's a lot of parents, I feel like, use screen time as a way to distract their children.
Yeah, totally.
And instead of,
it becomes, I want to spend time with my, we go out and we play. If there is video games, sometimes we play together and we hang out. We do a lot of stuff together, and he's pissed right now because this is his pool time, play time outside, and they've been doing icebreakers at his little day camp he's been going to, and he's coming home pretty upset. The sun came out today at 2 or whatever, which is the end of the day for them. It's just just sucked. So,
well, hopefully he gets some pool time this week. We're rooting for him.
There you go.
Over on the Art of Bombing.
That's right, Bomb Squad. Let's get him. Let's get him into the pool.
Get him into the pool. Let him burn some of that energy. Well, we have a great episode in store for you today. A great conversation. We had a fantastic comedian on the show. Sumukh Torgalkar was on the show, and we had a fantastic conversation. We talked, he's a comedian that, is doing comedy on his own terms, and I think that's an important thing. I think as comedians, we all need to be trying to take control of our careers. And I feel like, I'm sure you would agree with this, some of the most successful comedians in the industry today are comedians who, got frustrated with how their career was going. Maybe they were working with other people, but they just finally decided, you know what? No more. I'm going to do things how I want to do it.
That's right.
If you people don't like it, then you don't believe in me. Get out of my way. And then they did their own thing, and now they're very successful and or famous.
Yeah. If you want to hear from a comic who's very clear about his direction and where he's taking his career, but and also the way he is defining success for himself. And he's also very clear about what he's not trying to do. And I think that kind of direction is missing from a lot of people who are in comedy right now. And as a result, they get really frustrated and jaded with comedy.
Yep. And then when you get frustrated and jaded with comedy, you can lose your love for comedy. And so it's important to think about that, and that's a couple of things, coming up later this week on the Callbacks episode. These are the topics we do cover. We talk about doing comedy on your own terms, and we talk about how you can maintain your love for comedy or re-spark the love for comedy.
That's right.
Which I think are two important episodes. And I would say this, if after you listen to this episode with Sumukh, if you enjoy the conversation, which I know you will, and you want to support a comedian, he just had a new comedy album came out. It's called You May Have This. Go, put it into the Google search machine. Just type in You May Have This and go buy it. You could go to a music platform and stream it. But if you really want to support an artist, go buy it. Don't just go buy it so that they get a bigger cut. They don't get crap for streaming. We know that because there's been so much controversy with streaming, especially with comedy. So, go buy his album.
And today's sponsor for the Art of Bombing podcast is Sumukh Torgalkar's album. You May Have This. And it comes with a jingle. You may have this comedy album that you don't have, but you will.
All right, Josh. I think that's enough of that. I think we need to get into the conversation with Sumukh, but before we do, I gotta say this, Josh. I want you to know you've been fired.
What for the song?
No, not for the song. Actually, I mean, maybe that'll be in the future, but you have been fired. You have been fired by Randy and Carlo for embarrassing a 13-year-old girl.
I got
in the crowd.
I got fired from like two people, Randy and Carlo.
No, his last name is Carlo.
Carlo.
Randy and Carlo. So only one person, just one person fired you. But it sounds like two. So you're fired. Yeah. Randy actually didn't do he didn't go over to buymeacoffee.com/AOBpod, which you can do that if you want to go kick into the coffee pot, the tip jar, and fire Josh. You can do that over there. But what he did is he just went and he Venmo'd us directly, which if you want to do it that way, you can do that too. He just went and Venmo'd Debub Comedy, sent us a nice little tip. And also had this to say. I want to read this. Thank you, Randy, for these kind words. He says, great podcast. You do a great job. Every comic should listen to this every week. It's full of knowledge and very entertaining from start to finish. So thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
Hey, you're fired, Josh. You're not allowed to talk.
All right. So I'll get my stuff.
Get your stuff and get out of here. You've been fired.
Damn it.
All right. Let's get into this conversation with Sumukh. Enjoy.
And now, it's time for the stand-up soundbite.
I used to live in a really diverse neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, they exist. So one morning I was just at my local coffee shop, standing in line. This older white gentleman comes up behind me. He points at the white cashier and he says to me, "Oh, she'll speak English." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Most of the employees here can't speak English." Like, bold move to say to some random brown guy you're standing in line with, but okay. Like, it's 7 in the morning right now, you know? All I want's my cup of coffee. I don't want to have to deal with this guy. But I was this close to taking that cup of coffee and throwing it into his face. Here's a side fact. If you take a cup of coffee and throw it into an old racist face, it gives you way more energy than drinking the cup of coffee. It really pumps you up for the day ahead.
It's the art of bombing.
So before I hit record, you were saying that you live up in the mountains north of Fort Collins, about 40 minutes or so. I mean, that's going to be tough because it's hard to get, it's already hard to get spots. Like we're here in Loveland recording, and going down to Denver, I'm like, oh, an hour. And I'm sure it's kind of the same, and it's a little harder to get time, I guess.
For sure. I was self-aware of that when I moved here, which was right before the pandemic. So I moved from LA to here, and then the pandemic happened. So it was a double whammy of I live far away from the cities, which I was, again, self-aware and ready for that kind of lifestyle. But also then the pandemic happened. So it put this kind of pressure, like it did on everybody else, to kind of be creative in other ways. And so I was already doing YouTube videos in LA, so I just started doing more of them, and that built. And I just do like how-to videos, reviews, things like that, make it funny.
I was just going to ask, what kind of YouTube videos do you do?
Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
That was going to be the next question.
Yes. So it's still allowing like the feel of what my stand-up is, while it just being sketch and helpful for other people. So it's the core of what I always got into and wanted to do comedy for, which is to make people laugh, but also make them feel like I'm helping them out, being educational.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's been great. That kind of built through the pandemic to a realm that's fine and continues to build and monetizes. So I'm happy with that while I'm doing stand-up in the way that I want to be doing it. I know that sounds weird to say, but
I feel like that's the dream for everybody.
Yeah.
To be able to do stand up how they want.
Yeah, and that's kind of the feel of what I had out in LA when I moved. It was great. I had a great time in LA, but at the same time, I have a job outside of comedy too, and I didn't want to be too attached to the industry, I guess, just experiencing it out in LA. I didn't want to lose my love for comedy, pretty much, which that can happen when it becomes your job.
Oh, absolutely. You're 100% correct on that. I'm curious, is that what brought you to Colorado? Was it your regular job or?
It was a partner who is now my ex.
Oh,
so
that's how I got to California. So.
Yeah. So that's a whole other story of bombing that doesn't need to be talked about.
Yeah, we don't have to talk any further. All I can say is relatable.
Yeah. So that was the start of it. And also, that was that acceptance of, how comedy is, and it's still an individual pursuit where you do have a partner here, and we were together for a while, so she was supportive of it. But at the same time, I was ready to, just settle down a bit while approaching comedy in a different way and stand-up in a different way. So that's the same thing. Now my life in stand-up is I'll do corporate events, but I also do fun indie shows. And I did plenty of clubs, but the club, environment, I'll do them, but I'm not pursuing it as hard because so many people are. And it just isn't as, I don't know. I did a corporate Monday and it's like, okay, I got paid to do this as much as I would have like 4 to 6 shows at a club. And maybe I don't want to be up that late with drunks anymore. I had that experience, but so I took a different shift and different approach in how I wanted to look at stand-up that I didn't think was in any way, I wasn't selling out or something. I'm still myself.
Oh, absolutely.
Still doing the same act and connecting with people just in a different way. And that's what's been great about the internet or podcasts like this or all these other avenues that you can take your comedy with while still being authentic.
Oh, absolutely. Now, doing corporate comedy, because I do a little bit of corporate comedy too, I'm curious, is that transition was part of that from, because I, without knowing what your videos and stuff are about, is that some of that come from the kind of, education type stuff that you put on YouTube? Is it like, based on, oh, you're doing comedy, but also kind of giving speeches or like working with companies? You know how like, I guess some comedians will do that where they do comedy, but it's keynote speaking, coaching, like kind of all mixed into one? Or is it just you're getting hired strictly as a stand-up?
Yeah, it depends. For the most part, it's strictly as a stand-up. And like what happened recently, Monday, was just, hey, we're having a convention. We just want a comedy hour, so it'll get that vibe, a lighter feeling, and it was great. I'm doing another show because this month is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as well as Mental Health Awareness Month. So this company wants me to just come in and do comedy, and then I do a Q&A after, because I've talked about both issues on stage. So that means a lot to me, then that is, hey, we can all laugh, but then we can connect, and the purpose behind why you've brought me here is there, and we can talk on a little bit of a deeper level that can work in that corporate environment too, because they're starting to be more sensitive finally to these issues.
Yeah, which is good, which is great. So you moved out here from LA, so I assume you were already doing comedy, because you said you were already doing stuff out there, and you must like Colorado because you didn't leave.
Now again, it's a very weird transitional phase right now because it's 6 months removed from that split. So got a home, thought I was settling down, and now, I'm still happy up there. But again, there's a lot to life that's still got to be determined. But for now, I'm very happy there and happy with what my place is in comedy right now. And we'll see what it continues to be and what happens. I don't know. It's just stunning when I look at the pandemic and I look at friends of mine who got huge on TikTok and now they're headlining clubs and things like that. So you just never know in this business. And but I feel comfortable right now with where I'm at, and we'll see what happens,
Oh, well, that's a good way to feel about it. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable where they're at. So you have something that a lot of comedians don't have, for sure. Because it takes a while to, be happy. And I think, that's one of the things why comedians have trouble finding happiness is because they want, there's always that continued urge to want more. You can get to a certain level. Well, that's not enough. What's next? How do I get to this next level? And being able to just be like, well, right now I'm good. I get to do comedy how I want to do it. I get to do the things I want to do. I have full control on what's going to happen. I don't have to go do these crappy one night I mean, I can if I want, but it's not necessary. It's not a necessity to getting my name out there anymore, which, I think that's for a lot of comedians.
Yeah. And I always have pretty deep self-reflections on things. And I think it came at one point when I was in LA where I asked myself, like, if you were Kevin Hart, would you be happy? And I realized, like, no, I don't want that level of fame, So that was a big, I had to go all the way back to understanding, why do you do comedy to begin with? And that's a question I've asked myself seemingly all the time. And I'm sure most good comedians or comedians that care do that. But that's where, I really love this and I didn't want to lose that. And I've been lucky enough to have a job outside of comedy that I never let go of and progressed in that too. So to kind of have two careers going is really nice. And I'm pretty like I said, comfortable with that. I think that allows myself to be content, even if both can be frustrating at times.
Absolutely.
But that's kind of the nature of being creative these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have to assume that since you said that you kept your job since you've been doing comedy and progressed in that job, that it must be pretty flexible. That has allowed you to be able to still pursue stand-up, which is so huge for comedy.
I started in Columbus doing comedy, and I worked at this company as well, too. So then when I accomplished everything I could out of Columbus, comedy-wise, and when I wanted to move to L.A., luckily, the nature of my job, I just said, hey, I want to move, is part-time a possibility? And they were still cool with full-time and me working from there. So yeah, since 2016, I've been working from home, doing that job. That's been successful. And yeah, that allows that flexibility. Mind you, it was crazy in LA because I would match East Coast time. So I'm starting my days at like 5:30 in the morning. And then,
trying to do comedy at night.
Yeah, doing comedy at night. So it was wild, but
definitely makes for a long day.
Yeah.
But we make those sacrifices when we really want something. So it doesn't feel as bad when you love it. So it's good too, like you said, that you're looking at it from an approach of you don't want to stop loving comedy because then when you do, like you said, then you get bitter about everything. It's like, oh, I got to get up early for my job. Now I got to do comedy, and like it's easy to get frustrated.
Totally, yeah. And I that's why I've been in those phases, and that's why I needed to take a step back and think about it more. And I'm always encouraging of that of other comedians. Of course, we see enough social media to know they're not doing that. So there you go. Exactly. Well, that's great. I love that. I love hearing that you're comfortable where you're at in comedy and things are going great. But that's not what this podcast is all about. It's not all about the bells and whistles of the good stuff of comedy. It's we're going to take a look at the other side of it, and that's bombing. Yep. So I would love to hear your story of a time that you bombed or had a really bad show. Okay, I will give you one specific show, but this is about, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a genre of types of shows. So obviously I'm Indian, so I will do shows for the South Asian community sometimes, events, things like that. The ones where I've found bombing can occur are graduation parties or something where these parents want to celebrate their kids. And so that's what happened. It was like two of their kids' birthdays or some kind of achievement. And they're like, come in and do some comedy at it. And anyway, with corporate events, private events, like, already to begin with, you're a bit concerned as a comedian because are they going to structure this in the right way that cares about comedy? Or are they just like, hey, it's a great idea to have comedy. Let's just bring you and throw you in and pay you. And that's what happened. I mean, it was just kind of chaos, like kids running around, which
I did a birthday party that was very similar to that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a birthday party for a kid either.
So, yeah, that was the thing. It was just, there are these certain aspects when I do these shows where I know pretty quickly, this is going to be a tough 45 and I've got to just kind of work whatever is given to me, but it will be a bomb. And this is the thing. It's a bombing on a much deeper level because it's my identity and my culture. Like that's why they book me, because they're like, oh, an Indian comedian, like let's bring him in. But it depends, right? With Indian American audiences, because I am Indian American, I was born here, I grew up here. My age group and younger, okay, I can connect with them. But when it is like my parents' generation or even my age that immigrated from India that are here now and have kids, that's just a different realm of what they connect with comedy-wise. Mm-hmm. Or even they're like, why is this happening? We're not going to laugh. We're just too, proper. I don't know what to say exactly.
That's interesting, though, that observation, how one generation, I mean, you get that with every generation, but it's a lot different when that generation is, an immigrant, you know what I mean? Like even like if you grew up here, sometimes it might be harder to relate to an older generation that grew up here, but there's still some commonality. And I suppose like when they grew up in a whole different country and culture, it's even harder to find that connection.
Right. And even though obviously things have gotten much more global, they understand stand-up, they watch certain stand-ups. Of course, Russell Peters being the biggest for sure. But at the same time, it is sometimes just events where we want to have some entertainment, or sometimes I just feel like, well, we're just throwing money at a lot of different things or whatever to show off a bit, maybe. Who knows? So it's that one in particular stands out to me because it was just pure chaos. It was like going into a bar where no one cares or no one knows comedy is even happening and bombing. But it's these weird moments where I do love stand-up, and I chose this thing that's about getting on a stage and performing. But it reminds me of being a kid again and performing, like playing my violin in front of Indian people at Indian community events, or these things that bring back not the greatest of memories. And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? But yeah, it's a deeper bomb because you want to connect with your own people, and that's why they brought you here. But then you realize, oh no, we have differences, or maybe there are other reasons why I'm here. And it's always funny because no one's ever insulting after. They're still proud of me because I'm doing it, but I'm also like, but no one laughed. Did anyone have a good time?
That's like the worst. Any show when people are just like watching and maybe give it an occasional smile, but don't show you outwardly that they're enjoying it. And then afterwards, oh, that was great.
Yeah. And that can be a strange issue to how Indian people operate or how the culture is. Mm-hmm. So it all just kind of depends. I can tell you, I did this festival that was the Desi Comedy Festival, so completely for South Asians in the Bay Area. I'm like, this was phenomenal. Like they filled Cobb's Comedy Club and then a convention center, and it just crushed, it was like, again, so there are a lot of people of our culture, of our background that are very into stand-up and get it and love it and embrace it. And there are others where it's just a different approach to how comedy is, that they, whether it be from Bollywood or what they grew up with, that's a little bit more simple and to the punch, or however it might be, where that's just not me, having been an American and growing up here with a certain comedy approach and how I do stand-up, where, again, I just, I can only be me, and I'm just not connecting here somehow. Like, you're going to have to pay attention a little longer to my stories.
Right. And before you got comfortable with where you were and realized that that's just not your style, did you ever, like, in situations like that, did you try to figure out how to, bridge that gap, and try to be so that you could connect with people that might have been, not quite in touch because of the difference in the way they grew up?
Yeah. I mean, I still try to make it as best of a show as possible because they still know this is supposed to be comedy. I don't know. So in just trying to connect with them, of course, just trying to do crowd work or things like that. But to those kinds of events where kids are involved too, that helps a lot because sometimes I can just talk to the kids and they were born here and grew up here, so they enjoy it because they're all of a sudden being involved in it, and it can save what is otherwise like kind of a really formal kind of feel to sometimes some of these events that they have, and they're like, why is this happening? We really want to just go eat now. You can kind of see it on their faces.
I was going to say, that sounds like a lot of corporate comedy, especially when you get to the holiday season. It's like you're what's standing between them and their Christmas gifts. Yeah. And so they just hate you. They're like, I just want to come drink and eat, get my gift, and go home. Why are you talking to me?
Yeah. But, you learn over time to work it. And I think at a younger age, when this was newer to me and I was doing corporates or doing events like this, yeah, of course, it kind of, first the bomb always hurts, but then it hurt a little more to go, well, you paid me to be here. I want to do the job well, let alone like we all have a connection in this way that I want to fulfill that too somehow, so, but then you just do it for a long enough time and you become truly a professional at it that I can work through it whatever way it is now. There are other comedians and sometimes, just depending upon where across the country, because sometimes people reach out to me and they're all the way in the East Coast and I'll say, look, I can't imagine for what you want. Like I'm going to cost way too much money because you need to pay for my flight. So then I'll just connect them with other Indian comedians closer to them. You know what I mean? And there's some across the country that's what they do. That's how their livelihood is they do the Indian events and they can work it really well. But for me, like I talk about being Indian on stage, but it never was like the focal point of my comedy. And even then it was with the experience of having been born here and grown up here, Yes, I know all the different states of India and the different types of people, and I can make fun of that or whatever, which would work better in those kinds of environments. But that's never, been my angle to my comedy, I guess. So
yeah. Just trying to be a comedian.
Yeah, exactly. And I started in Columbus in Ohio, where of course, like I was the only Indian person. I mean, especially when I started. Now it's so much more diverse, which is wonderful.
It's great.
But at the time, we didn't have enough women in comedy in that city. It was disappointing, let alone all the other varieties of individuals that can bring a really nice, diverse, balanced show. So yeah, I stood out for sure. And let alone when you're doing like small towns around Ohio or even in Columbus itself, it's like, they barely know Indian people, it's the simple stuff of the convenience store owner or, the doctor in the
simple,
town.
Simple stereotypes.
Right. Yep. So that can still work and whatever, but that gets back to kind of the way the YouTube thing was, where initially, I guess my hope was also providing some humor while being educational, even on that topic, because I knew sometimes I was going in being like, they don't know Indian people at all, so if I can lighten that mood towards it, that's great. Sometimes, you don't want to do too many stereotypes or all of a sudden they're just enhancing what limited knowledge they already have, but there's a way you can maybe work that into making them a little bit more educated.
Now, just starting out in Columbus, like you said, and having to deal kind of with this stuff, obviously you made that observation to where you realize, hey, you got to come in here at a different angle just because they limited experience. The audience is going to have limited experience. Do you feel like that's helped you like with other aspects of comedy too, like having that observation early on to where you can see, kind of observe different things in comedy and adjust accordingly?
Yeah, definitely. And I started in 2006 and it was a different time to it where, of course, you hit every stage you could do if you wanted to be a stand-up. And so that allowed me to hone different environments. The two open mics in town were very different. One was just a campus bar with kind of a grungy feel to it, and the other was a little bit more in a nicer area of the town, the arts district-y type of the town. So, but yeah, that's why I did small town shows too, because I'm like, well, if you want to be a good comedian, you got to do every room. And so I never shied away from that, and that allowed me to understand a variety of different audiences. I also think it's a benefit to work a job too, because most people are not as into comedy as we are. Yeah. So you have to understand how to make them laugh too. When all they do is do a job, I mean, most people don't go to comedy shows that often. We go way too often, and then we get too small of a viewpoint.
No, absolutely. And you see that a lot with comics who are like, you got to grind all the time. And that's all they do is, they barely work a job and they just go to open mics all the time. And then you start to see that in their comedy where their jokes become more kind of inside baseball and the audience is, and then they wonder why they can't get booked. And it's like, well, it's because you can't make a regular audience laugh. You got to go live and have some experiences to draw from.
Yeah.
And that's for me. I started comedy late. Like, I didn't start till I was 31. And, and I almost got into comedy when I was when I was 21. I thought about it. And I kind of did a little bit of writing and went to a comedy show and was kind of thinking about it, but never pulled the trigger. And then fast forward 10 years, I finally decided to do it. And I'm glad I waited that 10 years because, I see these younger comedians who start right out of high school and, if they stick with it, they get to be great. There's plenty of great examples of, comedians who are, huge household names now that started right out of high school. Mm-hmm. But you also see the difference in material where, what they're talking about isn't as relatable to most general audiences. And then having that life experience that I was able to draw from, I was like, oh, I can be more relatable to these audiences because I'm doing the same things they're doing, I work a regular job, I'm married, do all the things.
Right. Yeah. It's very important to me if you want to be a well-rounded stand-up. And I understood that. But again, it's a different realm now where you do, I'm almost, as much as I love stand-up, I'm almost encouraging of newer comedians, like, start a podcast, do TikTok, because and don't disregard stand-up if you love it, but the grind of it is not necessary when you're not going to build a fan base from 10 open mics a week. You are from the internet, and then, slowly continue with your live stuff too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. That's the thing too with comedy now is that, there's so many things that are adjacent that can, and it, there's so many good examples that prove what you're saying to be true is that there's comedians who just like, especially during the pandemic. That's one thing we learned during the pandemic is that stand-up comedy can just cease to exist. Live stand-up comedy can just cease to exist. And it was a hard wake up for a lot of comedians, but it is what it is. But the comedians that like pivoted and they're like, well, I'm going to do, a YouTube show, or I'm going to start concentrating on TikTok or whatever it was, or I'm going to focus just on my podcast. And they, like I said, they were able to, build these big fan bases, and now they're headlining clubs and headlining their own shows or doing whatever. And it's not because they, went to 10 open mics a week, like you say. It's because they like took some of that time and focused on something that was comedy adjacent, but then reverts back to being able to help you do more stand-up in the long run. I feel like as comedians, and I've been there myself, we think too short-term, and we don't think about the long-term of things, where short-term is, I got to get up, go to the open mics every day, right, do the thing. But long-term, it's like, well, how do you build the fan base and focus on that so that down the road, I can just headline clubs.
Right. And so that's the business element of where it is now. Mm-hmm. To the core of what this podcast is about, though, too, I don't think you can learn how to bomb unless you do the open mics or you do enough live stuff. So that's what's fascinating is I would be intrigued to see the less experienced that are starting to do live shows if they actually, because some I'm sure are bombing in front of their own audiences.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because there's that different...
We've definitely heard stories of that.
Yeah. And that's where all of a sudden the comedy club is now like a con. I don't mean that a con artist, like Comic-Con or, where you're really coming to see the person you've seen on video a lot. Mm-hmm. But it's weird because you're coming to see a live show from them, so you're expecting them to deliver on that when they have no capability of it. Yeah, their whole experience has been through a virtual internet environment. So it's interesting. In that realm.
Yeah, and it's especially, like you said, for the people who've never, like, didn't even do comedy that now can sell out comedy clubs just because they just did YouTube and got big or whatever, or TikTok, and then suddenly they got to go to these clubs. Because I've heard stories where it's like, the show was terrible, but the clubs don't care because they're filling it and they're selling drinks and they're making money, which they need to, because without them making money, then we lose opportunities, potential opportunities to do comedy. So it's like it's all a necessary circle of events, and because you hear too, like a lot of comedians that are like purists will complain, they're letting some YouTube star headline their club and it's blah blah blah, and I could do better. And it's like, but can you sell out their club?
Right. It's
they're keeping the doors open, so hopefully you can come back there down the road and do shows.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Listen, I love stand-up, and I'm probably a purist at heart, and I'm all about, putting in your time. But at the same time, the business changes, and you have to modify with it, and not, be the Abe Simpson old man,
shaking fists, get off my lawn.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where when I see those kinds of posts, I go, I'm sorry you're bitter towards it, but change yourself and it'll potentially come to you then. Or it won't, and that's probably why I didn't go full time to be sucked into that. Yeah. And be sucked into the nature of how unpredictable this business is. Yeah.
Being able to have good self-reflection and balance, I think, are two very important things with stand-up comedy. Yeah. To really, because otherwise, like you said, without those things, it's easy to get bitter and get angry. And then this thing that you started because you loved, you no longer want to do because you hate. And that's like, to me, the ultimate, like, it's so sad.
Yeah. And I don't, again, I'm still going to keep tying this back to your podcast of the Art of Bombing, but
tie it up.
I don't like when someone is bombing and their bitterness comes through.
Oh, I hate that.
Like
angry.
Yeah, just you're bombing. Eat the bomb and do whatever you can. Maybe you can bring them back. They never were there to begin with. Sorry, there's no bringing back. But but do grace. Something. Yeah. I think that's another element to something that everyone should learn at open mics. But I also see plenty at open mics just go at what limited crowd is there. And it's like, no, you're bombing and you need to learn how to bomb.
Yeah. And also don't scare this audience member away. Right. There's 10 more comics that are waiting to perform for that one person. They're like, there's one more person here than there was last week. Don't scare them out.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We could go on and on about open mics for sure. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm kind of curious about, because you said you started doing stuff like on YouTube with doing like the reviews and education type stuff. Like, how did you, what kind of prompted you to decide that you wanted to do that? And then, and how much time did you start focusing on that to like, because when you do stuff like, there's a lot of marketing involved and trying to get people to consume that content.
Yeah, I would say, so this began originally, I made this video like 2011 when I was in Columbus, and it was about how to replace your shower head. And the actual joke of it was that I wasn't successful in replacing it by the end. So it came off as more of just, I'm not successful at fixing things. And I did a second video like that after I moved to LA. And, a lot of downvotes because people were actually thinking this was a legitimate thing. And then we're like, why is this guy joking around? He failed.
They didn't realize it was satire.
Yes. So then I was like, okay, this isn't working. Let me actually fix things and be funny during it. And that's where it started to build. And basically what happened was there are a few things that just were not on YouTube for people. And I, ended up, I needed to fix something. I just made the video, and it was the niche thing that became available to others. So right now, I'm the go-to video on YouTube for storm door closer jams. So you see, like, it's such a specific thing to this thing everyone has on their home. But yeah, I gave the fix it for it. So yeah, then the YouTube algorithm really shot it up. So that this license plate, boxing hand wraps, they're just these really specific how-to videos, but that a lot of people are looking for. And then the algorithm kind of shot it up because it was niche.
Yeah.
And so
that's
then,
amazing.
and then people were just like, oh, this guy's funny and helping me out. Like, yeah, I'll subscribe, because that's just the nature of YouTube now. Like, comment, and subscribe, Yep. And it just kind of built from there. And again, right now, there's like 2,200 subscribers, and, I've had total of all the videos over 1.5 million views. So in the scheme of what YouTube is, that is not huge.
No, but it's still decent.
I'm making money off of it.
Yeah, it's still decent.
Yeah, and it's bringing eyeballs to me that never would have experienced me from around the world, you know? And so that's where, again, when I was grinding in Columbus and so stand-up focused and just not as in tune to YouTube, that's where I wish I kind of grabbed at it earlier on. Nevertheless, again, I have a friend who started around Columbus. He lives around there, became one of the biggest YouTubers like early on. But I'm like, I don't even want your life either, because you've got to make a video every day and just be connected with your fans in ways that is not appealing to me. So there, there's a reason I live in the mountains. Is that I like a little bit of distance. Yeah. But I still want people to appreciate my comedy and me to connect with them on that level, but not when it's like a 24/7 kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally get that. That's like one of my it makes all the sense, because that's one of my biggest like issues with social media, especially as in entertainment, we got to try to like put content out there. And with social media, like especially with like Instagram or TikTok, you need to really make it successful and worth your time. You have to be able to put out, at least very minimum 1 video a day, but better if you can put out 2 to 3 videos a day, every day. And to me, I'm just like, that is too much time. I don't want to do it. Like, I just, no.
Yeah.
But I'll go in spurts where I'll be like, well, I'm just going to edit a bunch of stuff. I'll edit a bunch of videos and get some stuff ready. And then I'll spend like 2 weeks doing it. I'm all like gun-ho. And then by the end of the 2 weeks, I'm like, I need a break.
Yeah, sure.
But it is very demanding.
Yeah, but you're at least still making the decisions for yourself and what's very rewarding to you. And I think I realized that if I had gotten that kind of YouTube fame early on, the ones that I do know that did, it's like you just can't stop. And you see from some of them that they needed mental health breaks or their mental health breaks played out, So, and that's what is really tough for me, because I don't, I know I started doing comedy during the MySpace era, but just as Facebook was starting to explode, to me, I joined Facebook when I was in college. It was just a college thing. We never anticipated what it's become, but you see how it's played out, and I just can't imagine if I already think too much of my life was connected to the internet because of comedy, let alone if my livelihood relied on it. It seems a lot.
Yeah, I would agree. It does. And that's just from, my little experience with, just social media. I'm like, it does. It's so, and I see what you're saying, because if you blow, especially the people who blew up early on when YouTube was just kind of starting, it did become like you didn't get to choose. Like you said, you don't get to make the choice for yourself. You're kind of forced into it, and then, now I have to do it. Like I said, it becomes the job that you hate, because you have to do it to pay those bills.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of like with, because you mentioned MySpace. Dane Cook was a good example. He blew up on MySpace and started selling out, and then released a really good album, and then all that, he had to keep putting out content. Back then it was albums, not as much, like on social media, but the quality of his material went down in those, first few years after he blew up. And I feel like that's what happened to anybody, because it's a lot of pressure to, I couldn't imagine, trying to put out a new album or a new special every year. Like these comics that do that, I'm just like, oh, I feel so bad for you.
Yeah, it's a lot. And that speaks to how the industry operates too. Like he does a few movies, maybe they're not the greatest movies, and then you're not the talk of town anymore.
Yeah.
Or whatever might happen. So yeah, it's again a fickle business, and I think being Indian, my parents were not exactly like, "Ooh, how exciting! You're picking a extremely unpredictable, unstable business." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'll keep my other job," and I have for 16 years now, for as long as I've been doing comedy. So
that's funny,
but it's worked out in a strange way. They were right. I hate to say that, but it is good to have that other financial support, because then you can make the creative decisions you want for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. Now we're gonna get it. We're gonna start wrapping up. This has been great. I mean, we still got a little ways to go. I just got some stuff I like to talk about. Got the list of stuff.
Did I do enough bombing things?
Oh, absolutely,
right.
absolutely. You told the story, and it stemmed this organic conversation.
Was it too deep and too depressing? Like,
no,
my
great.
Identity bombed. Sorry.
No, this is great. I mean, I always say we're going to start wrapping up, but then we're going to be here for like 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay, cool.
So, well, that's my cue that I got to get into these other questions.
Okay, sounds good.
And the first thing that I like to talk about, because you talk about your bombing story, and we talk about how we can learn from failure. What are some of the things that, like, when you have these shows, what do you look for to try, and how do you try to prevent things from happening in the future? How do you analyze your own sets? And
analyzing the bombs or just any set? So I record every set on my iPhone, but if I bombed, I do not listen back to it. I don't know what that means about me, but I'm like, well, I experienced it in the moment. That seems good enough. Why recreate? Why have to endure it again? I know it didn't go well, and there isn't anything from the recording to me that it would just be like nothing. And, usually in the bombing that I'm talking about is going into an event with polished material too, right? So I guess I could be listening back to crowd work or things like that. Maybe that worked during it, and I'm trying to remember that. But I always listen back to new material because I want to know how it sounded, what worked. And even if it's a mic and I bombed or there's two people and they're kind of chuckling, I still listen to that because that's important to the process, and I'm working on new material and trying to figure out, is this even worth continuing with? So, yeah, that's always been a big part of my analysis, is to listen back and try to figure out all of those aspects to it, because I do think joke writing is like poetry, and that presentation to it also. So that matters a lot to me. But yeah, the bombs I've talked about, I don't listen.
You're like, no.
They might still be on my phone, but or I might delete it. But yeah, it's like sometimes you just don't get them, because I'm like, what more could I have done? It's the polished stuff. It's the stuff that's here for this kind of audience in this environment. You could put an entirely different group of Indian people in a different place, and this crushes, Yeah. So it's the difficulty of that rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah,
that's where.
Well, one thing I've noticed sometimes is that listening back sometimes is what'll happen is I'll think I'm doing terrible, and I'm not doing as terrible as I thought, or there was something that might have happened that the recording picks up that I didn't notice, some kind of a distraction or something that I might have missed, and suddenly you lose the audience, or you skip part of your punchline, and then you're like, oh, that's why I missed a key word. That's why that joke didn't work, and then it went downhill from there or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I feel better about myself because now I know the mystery. I'm like, oh, that's what happened.
Yeah.
But I say that, and full on knowing I hardly ever listen back to any of my stuff is, like I should.
Yeah.
Now, when you are on stage and you're performing and you tell a joke and it doesn't land, or you feel like you're starting to bomb and lose your audience, in that moment, what goes through your mind and how do you try to deviate?
Well, in my mind, I'm just like, oh no. It depends. Yeah, there's like that little, I'm like, oh no, I usually don't sweat on stage, but I'm like, oh no, I know I'm probably going to sweat. And it all depends on where I'm at and knowing the amount of time I have left, right? So some of these Indian shows where I bombed, I'm like, oh, the first joke did not land. You know, you always want that first joke to get them going no matter what show you're doing. And then you're like, I got 45 more minutes of this. So how am I going to navigate through that while still being myself, doing my act, feeling out this audience because it's not landing from the start. So yeah, it's feeling out what will get them to be entertained and enjoy this. What's going on here right now that's making them not? And sometimes it's, oh yeah, we were told a comedy show's happening, whatever, you know. So you just grow to feel it out and try to make it work from there. But that's an awful feeling when you know, it's different if I'm like, oh, okay, I'm trying new stuff. This is bombing. I can kind of go back to some other tried and true stuff to get them back. But when it is like, hey, I got a lot more time and I know this is already starting off bad. So now I got to feel out this audience and try to figure out a way to make this entertaining for them. And for me, frankly.
Well, yeah, that's right. Going back to what we said earlier, bomb with grace.
Yeah.
Make it graceful if you're going down. Now, earlier you said that to you, the writing process is very poetic, which I thought that's a beautiful statement. And that is a great lead into talking about a little bit about your writing process and what's for you, your evolution of a joke from, oh, this is the idea to it's definitely going in the act, and then it's going to go on eventually the special or the album.
Okay. So idea might pop in my head anywhere I may be. So then I remember, you know, just in the way I'd write it in my set list, and I just put that idea down in my phone. Then when I go back later to actually sit in front of my notebook, then I write out the joke as I'd have it in my mind. Go out, start to tell it. Now, with the internet, I've started actually using Instagram Reels as a way to just talk out jokes. And if it goes well, maybe that's something that translates to the stage. And honestly, who cares anymore? People, you know, stand-ups are sharing content in ways that purest idea of, ooh, nobody knows about this till I record it on the album is just gone.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah, with where I live and I don't dip down to mics, it's like, well, Instagram Reels are my new mics, you know? And I like it a lot better because I don't have to
leave your house.
Yeah, I don't have to leave my house.
Or be around people.
Yeah, 2 hours of like talking about cum and whatever that I've had to, you know, I've been through enough of that. So I've taken that approach, and sometimes that can be something that's good that can then translate to the stage also. And then, just working it out in front of live audiences and going, is this working or isn't it? And just continuing to punch it up as I actually speak it out, you know, as opposed to, I don't get too fixated on what I wrote in the notebook. It develops from there. And that's the kind of poetry I'm talking about, I guess, because it's still a performance in how you actually say it out loud and how it hits.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have an album coming out here pretty soon.
Yeah.
What was the process? What was your process for getting ready for that? You know, I mean, I too, I had an album that came out last year, and for me, it just involved a lot of touring and doing a lot of shows. I'm curious with, you know, doing more, you know, kind of corporate stuff and the job and stuff. How did you get ready to do that?
Sure. So it's really weird that my first album came out in 2015. So I was already building this, still doing the road, you know, living in LA, and I was ready to record it in 2020. Then the pandemic happened. So from there, it was already a built-in, ready-to-go album, and it wasn't until, obviously, summer of 2022 that I ended up recording it. So I know I want to record it. I found the spot to do it. So then come late 2021, I start to pick up the shows I need to get back out there and actually say this stuff again and polish it up and get it in the order that I want it to be so that I can actually record it. Yeah. So that was the whole process to it. It was very strange in being very excited that, okay, like at the beginning of 2020, at some point in 2020, I'm going to record this. It'll be out, and then having to kind of wait. So it's really weird when, there's an 8-year gap between two albums, which is the opposite of Dane Cook. I guess.
Right? Putting out an album every year. Wow. Well, then that just means it's going to be better quality. That's the way I look at it. You spent more time honing it in, polishing it up. Now, for your album, did you record it? Are you releasing it independently, or are you under like a record label?
Yeah, so I'm under a label, which is On Tour Records, and they're based out of Kentucky. And so what happened was my first album I released independently, got the sales that I could out of it, but then On Tour has that connection with SiriusXM. So like, okay, I will sign it over to you. And that's what's been great is then that first album is still running on SiriusXM on Laugh USA, the clean comedy channel. And those royalties are nice. So I was like, very excited to get a second album out there to obviously
get more royalties.
Get more money. I mean, I'm sitting in the mountains, not doing anything. Comedy wise, it's great when people are listening to you in all these other avenues, let alone you're making money.
Yeah,
just
that passive income.
Yeah, exactly.
Passive income. Is great.
And so that's why you'll hear that from a lot of comedians that SiriusXM is kind of that great way to continue to make some money doing comedy, and you're exposing yourself again to other people who otherwise may never have heard of you.
How did you end up? Because you said that you released it on your own, got as many sales as you can, and then they picked it up, your first album, and then obviously they're releasing your second. Did they just discover it somewhere, or how did that?
Yeah, so I knew the guy who's founded that label because he used to be a comedian.
Oh, okay.
And
so
then,
you kind of had a relationship.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So then via other comedians who had worked with him before, they had a good feeling about it. And then he reached out just knowing, he's like, I know your comedy and it's clean, and SiriusXM is looking for more clean stuff. So I'm like, well, this is great, you know? And it's like, okay, this album's been sitting out for a year. It's not like I'm going to get more raw sales from it in any way a year later. So it's best to kind of sign it over and see what it can do royalties wise through SiriusXM, and it's been great ever since. So then, because of that connection, I was like, I will just go. And I'm just there's so much involved when you do it independently, right? Getting your own sound person, setting it all up yourself. That now I was at a different stage in life where I'm like, I don't want to do all those things. So yes, I will pay the money that comes with signing it over to a label and all the things that are entailed in that to get the benefits then from it. So
that's great. Where did you record it then? Because you said you found the venue and you got to pick the venue.
Yeah, so I went back to Columbus again, and I had a relationship with this theater ever since I started doing comedy called Mad Lab. It's an indie theater in Columbus, 70-seater. So it sounded great. It was filled and it was fantastic. The first album I did at the Funny Bone at the club and filled that, and that was just an amazing achievement for me too, and also was why I then said, I have nothing else to accomplish here. I should move to LA, just see how that feels. But it was great to come back to Columbus. I mean, that's where I started. That's where I have so many connections and people really cheering me on that it felt good to come back and do the album there. And now, I mean, you just fill 70 people in a black box and it can sound great.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I recorded my album in my basement.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I did. I converted my basement in St. Paul to a comedy club, and then I just had strangers. That's why it's called Strangers in My Basement.
Oh,
I opened it up and had like 20 people in there, and it turned out great.
Who had no idea who you were?
Well, I mean, they were a lot of the people that came. I mean, one night was mostly people I knew because it was mostly friends, but the second recording was a lot of it was friends of other comics that were on the show. So they didn't know me. No, not on a personal level.
It's not even the comedy aspect. I'm more horrified you just invited random people into your home.
There was a little bit of screening. It was
good. Thank you.
A little bit of screening. They had to be vetted by the people that were on the show and helping with the show.
Okay, great.
So yeah, not a complete I don't know any of them. I mean, I didn't. So I mean, my friends could have vouched, and the comics could have vouched and invited a serial killer into my house. I don't know, but we took the risk.
Yeah, as long as the serial killer laughs, that's all that really matters.
Exactly. No, and it turned out pretty good. I mean, that's what's great about comedy is that you can do, especially now since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, comedy. If you did suggested outdoor comedy, right, people are like, "Get out!" You're like the worst thing for comedy possible. And now it's like, we can do comedy wherever, especially with, you got like the Don't Tell Comedy where they're doing pop-up shows wherever. Mm-hmm. The pandemic taught us that we could successfully do good shows outdoor. They're still not the greatest, but you can still do better shows outdoor. Right. So you don't need, you don't have to perform in a comedy club, and you don't have to record these albums and things in those places. You can create other spaces. And that's what I was trying to do, is I was trying to create a space to do more shows. That was the plan. And then the pandemic happened, so I couldn't. Yeah. So I just had to, and I was like, well, I spent all this time to start getting this ready to turn it into like a showroom to do more shows. And since I couldn't, I was like, well, I'm going to at least get something out of this. And that's why I recorded my album. And it was also more controlled. I had more control of who came, the sound, if I could have my tech guy come in whenever he wanted. I didn't have to worry about, can we get into the venue 2 hours early or any of that stuff. It was just like, you tell me what you need and I'll make it happen.
Right. And that's great, because that is anxiety inducing when, you have these people coming out for something that means a great deal for you, and you want every aspect to work properly.
Yep. So. And turn out great. Yep.
Speaking of the pandemic, did you ever do a virtual show?
I did a few virtual shows. Okay. Yeah. Some were better than others. I mean,
yeah. I mean, from a bombing standpoint, it was always kind of a bomb doing them.
Yeah.
It worked for what our lives were at the time, but there was definitely a corporate I did where they asked everyone to be on mute. So I'm just looking at people laughing, but there's no sound. Yeah. And you're just doing 30 minutes. It's a totally bizarre, different experience.
Oh, it absolutely is.
It was fine. It worked, but it was its own unique, weird realm of entertainment, but also kind of like, I'm bombing in my office.
Yeah. The worst part about that was, if you bombed if you bomb at an open mic, you got time to go home and decompress. But if you bomb on a Zoom show, close your computer and you're still in the same place you bombed.
Yeah, right.
There's no escape.
Yeah, no, that's. There wasn't when it came to the pandemic in so many ways. And of course, comedians found a way that we'll bring bombing into our home too.
We'll invite it into our safe spaces. Yeah. Well, this has been great. A couple quick things. Sure. We talk about bombing, and we kind of talked about your album. Real quick, when does it come out?
So it comes out, pre-orders start May 15th, and then it will release May 26th.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
If you're listening and you're enjoying this conversation, make sure you go check out his album. What's the name of the album?
You May Have This.
You May Have This.
So it's based off a joke in the act.
Awesome.
But
excellent. Well, like I said, we talk about those bad gigs, and maybe this was the gig that you'll choose for this, but I always like to go up more positive, so I like to hear my guests tell a story about one of their favorite or best gigs. And it doesn't have to be like the best gig you ever did because it was, paid a lot of money or it was, something special, just a gig that just near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I will, because my theme was talking about bombing in front of my own culture, my own identity. Like I mentioned, that Tessie Comedy Festival, they had this show at Santa Clara Convention Center, 400 people in the room.
Wow.
And I just crushed. Like everyone crushed, but that was a really rewarding feeling, to just connect on that level with the jokes that were all about being Indian or my family, that usually connect anyway with everybody, but to know in front of this audience that's really wanting comedy into comedy, exactly my kind of people, was really wonderful on a really deep level. So I appreciate those organizers for even putting it together, because it makes sense. The Bay Area is filled with Indian people, but it still was crazy for them to put an idea like that together, and for it also to be like wildly successful in a way that not only did you fill the rooms, but you filled them with like great comedy fans too. So it felt like my people on many different levels, which is really nice.
That's fantastic. Well, the last question that I like to ask is, we have the Art of Bombing Get Pumped playlist. Doesn't have to be a song that gets you pumped to do comedy. Maybe it's a song that gets you pumped to do one of your videos. I don't know. Can be anything. What's a song that you would add to the playlist?
I mean, okay, so there's a song I talk about in my act, but I don't necessarily have to.
You can do. It's your choice. You can add whatever you want.
It seems so cliche though, so I won't do that one. What really pumps me up? Ooh. All right, I'm just gonna say this because it's in my act, but it's so cliche. But it's Montel Jordan's "This Is How We Do It," and it's because I have a joke about it. So then, if there is a DJ at shows, they then end the show with it. So. And Montel Jordan, part of the joke is that he did like and retweet the joke on Twitter. So I have this connection with Montel Jordan that he certainly doesn't care about, but I do. So it does pump me up. Even if this song is now so weirdly overplayed like 30 years later.
That's amazing. I love it. That's a great that's a great song to add to the playlist. Well, this has been fantastic. Where can people find you? Direct people to your socials and all the things.
Everything is Sumukh Comedy, so SUMUKH Comedy. It's my website, sumukhcomedy.com. Instagram, Sumukh Comedy, and then the YouTube, Sumukh Comedy. But those are the two biggest places I'm at. You know, Twitter is just over.
Yeah, pretty much.
And Facebook is whatever. But if those are, I'm out there. So whatever social media you prefer, I'll be there.
Excellent. Well, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production.